Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here to discuss the firing of Jimbo Fisher. We're doing this Sunday morning. Blake, I'll be honest. I woke up expecting we could see some coaches fired in the SEC today. I thought that there might be a couple ahead of Jimbo Fisher if they're going to do it today, but that's not what happened, which leads me to believe the Aggies have a plan, given the resources they are going to have to pay out to Jimbo Fisher, some of that due immediately, and the resources they are going to have to pay to hire a coach of the caliber that they need to meet expectations in Texas A&M.
Yeah, just so everyone knows, like multiple people reporting this, that Jimbo will be fired as head coach of Texas A&M, and that number more than $75 million is what the buyout's going to be. So, listen, if you want to make a change, at Texas A&M, everyone knew what the financial picture would look like if they decided to do it, and so here we are. This is something that for the longest time people were saying the reason they weren't going to fire him is because of the buyout. Still at 75 plus million, and they don't care at this point because moving on to the next to try to figure out how they get back to being near the top of the SEC, and not just kind of being a team that had disappointing season a year ago. This year it's better, but it's not to where they want it to be. And so, yeah, Chris sets up a very interesting sort of situation here. But, before you can look ahead, you've probably kind of got to look at how did it get to this point, right? Because, we've kind of just seen the trajectory of how things have gone. And I think we all knew this was going to be the way this thing ended. We just didn't know when it was going to happen. Because I don't know, and you and I probably are in agreement on this. I don't know that either one of us are ever just fully confident that he was going to turn things around. To the point that they wanted it to be, even after last year, right? You could say, well, certainly they're going to have a bounce back year. 5-7 last year, they're 6-4 this year. That's just not what A&M paid that kind of money to get, right? And so it's the SEC. You know what's at stake. You know the results that are needed to keep your job. And at Texas A&M, which, oh, by the way, part of a conference that's about to enter a new era with a team named Texas joining the mix. This was the time they felt like we've got to make a move to make sure we are set up for the new look SEC next year. But, there's a lot more to it than that too. So.
Yeah, I think Billy Lucci of Texags was the first guy to have the news on this. So let's give credit there. That's what it's been widely credited as on the internet. But a couple things of interest, and this is from a CBS Sports article Sunday morning. I'm just going to read you some things. There was an infamous tweet earlier in the week about worst Power 5 records the last 2 years or whatever that was, where it was 5 or 6 coaches and Jimbo Fisher was on there. Never a list that you want to be on. I may be botching what that tweet was, but here's something along those lines. This isn't quite as damning as that one was, but this from CBS Sports. I'll just read it verbatim. The Aggies sit 6-4, 4-3 in the SEC in Fisher's 6th season. And by the way, this is my footnote. Just beat Mississippi State 51-10, which made the timing of this a little odd. Anyway, back to CBS. Notably, Fisher's 45-25 overall record is worse than that of his predecessor, Kevin Sumlin, who was fired with a 51-26 record. Fisher's Aggies have been underwhelming in SEC play as well. His 26-21 mark against conference opponents includes a 1-5 record against Alabama, the school Fisher was hired to topple in the SEC West. Since Fisher signed the extension in 2021, Texas A&M has gone 10-13 against SEC opponents and 12-14 against Power 5 teams. Certainly not the production Texas A&M expects from one of the highest paid coaches in the game. Blake, I know you got thoughts on this. I'll ask you to hold them for just a second to remind you our content brought to you by BetOnline. The last of the major pro sports leagues is off and rolling. College basketball here as well. BetOnline remains your top spot for all your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL, all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions. All the hoops betting action, along with every sport available at your fingertips with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that is CAPS, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. I guess we could talk about who we'd bet on as the Aggies' next coach. And
those
we want to
odds are
hear from
coming. Don't worry.
those odds are
They'll be
coming, and
there.
we want to hear from you in the comments if you're especially an A&M fan who you'd like. But Blake, want to give you a minute. Can you either react to some of the stats I just threw out or move forward to the next topic, which is who is going to replace Jimbo Fisher?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. You can reel off all the numbers and everything you want, but it's the column that has a big 0 in it to me, is the reason why he's not going to be the head coach there. 0 college football playoff appearances, 0 SEC West titles. And remember, think about the amount of money that's being paid here in the buyout and what the number is. To not have any of those, like, that is what they hired him for, right? And it's, sure, you can look at the overall record, which obviously plays into this, but it's still like, yeah, like, those records and everything stand out. But the one thing, again, you were hired for, and you knew it when you had the job, was to get to that level. And they've never gotten there. They didn't have a double-digit win season, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's what it comes down to. Like I said, this is the SEC in this era, and an era that's about to expand and add what figures to probably be 2 teams that, will be right there with a chance to be in the discussion every year in terms of having a chance to make the college football playoff. So, yeah, like, it's just, like you said, the timing's interesting coming off a game like that against Mississippi State. But at the same time, what do we always say about this kind of thing too? Where it's like, what's their remaining schedule? I don't have all the stuff we've been looking at this morning. I don't even have their
They've
remaining schedule.
got Abilene Christian and then at LSU.
Right. So let's say they win their final 2 games, right? You know where I'm going with this. Like, it's okay. Well, hey, we finish 8-4.
Yeah.
We improve our win total from 3 last year. I mean, we had a couple close losses, right? We lost by 6 to Alabama, 7 to Tennessee, 3 to Ole Miss. Felt like still, though, right? We're finishing in a positive direction. Well, then it's really hard to make that justification at that point. But if you know you're going to make the move, you make it as soon as you know. And it seems like, again, they met, what did they say, Thursday was the report. Pretty much had their mind made up. This Mississippi State game did not matter if that was the case, if they knew then that this was the move they were going to make. So, yeah, so that's where we are. And again, I don't think it really surprises any of us that this is kind of the direction this thing was going to get to. It's just a matter of when it was going to happen. And now we look forward, Chris, because like we said, there will be some betting odds out soon enough on who the next coach is going to be of Texas A&M. And in the world of social media, already plenty of names being bantered about. So I will do this, Chris. I will give you Pete Thamel's list. He is the one who just, look, everybody's going to put out a list. Let's call it what it is. Everyone is going to throw a list out there. We're just using this one not because I'm saying this is the one it's going to be, or we're not, backing this list up with any sort of whatever information, right? This is just what Pete Thamel looked at and said, hey, early list of potential names for Texas A&M, knowing money is no object. Lane Kiffin, shocker. Mike Elko, Mike Norvell, Dan Lanning, Jeff Traylor, Chris Klayman, Cliff Kingsbury, and Kalen DeBoer. Those are the names on the list. So, Chris, I'll let you go wherever you want with that.
Okay, I was exchanging texts with a friend of mine who covers another SEC school about this morning, and my first reaction was his, and I think as was yours, that you don't make this move probably at this point, maybe unless you have a pretty good idea of where you're going. Maybe you feel like you need to win a foot race to candidate X, that you're worried about somebody else firing a coach and making a move. And my friend brought this up. He said, do you really do all this and you're going to have to pay Jimbo Fisher, was it at $77 million or whatever it is, and all that is owed to him? The interesting thing is that some coaches have these offset buyouts that if you go take a job somewhere else, then, if you're making 70 million and they owe you 77, then, A&M only owes you $7 million or whatever the numbers would be. That's not there. So I think A&M has the right to look at a $30 million check right now, something like that. You can look up the numbers for yourself. There's a point to all this, and that is this. Do you go do that to get a Mike Elko? I would say you do that for a Jeff Traylor or somebody like, and no disrespect to any of these guys, right? But do you absolutely break the bank for guys that aren't been there, done that guys have done the things or very close to doing the things that you expect of your head coach? That's a lot of money and a big gamble. And maybe one of those guys is the right guy to come in and do it. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just looking at the optics of this, which makes me think it's either maybe a Dan Lanning, a Kalen DeBoer, some of those guys, some of the Power 5 guys that are in contention for a playoff spot. Or maybe they've got, because a lot of times you see this happen where an AD has got, or a committee has got, a guy out in the weeds that nobody knows is on the market. I don't know if that would be somebody that's been out of it, like an Urban Meyer. And I'm not throwing out names to say these guys are or aren't involved or shouldn't be, but just as a concept, or some other coach somewhere else that's winning at a big level that isn't being discussed publicly.
Yeah, I told you, I said, I think the top 2 names will be the ones that have the most SEC experience, right, of that group that was just put out there.
Yeah.
And that's Kiffin and Lanning. And look, here's the thing, right? For whatever reason, you can put Kiffin's name in with every year with a lot of opening. It's just the way this thing works. Knowing kind of how the stuff went last year with Auburn and all that. Yes, they just got, shellacked by Georgia, but still they're 8-2, right? And again, Kiffin's just someone that he's going to be mentioned in some of these. But it's just rinse and repeat every offseason pretty much at this point.
Yeah.
So, but I think Lanning is probably the most interesting candidate for me of the group. When you think about just the experience he has in the SEC, grad assistant in Alabama, at Georgia, has been there, has experienced all the success. Still got a chance to make the playoff, which I know, as you mentioned to me, that's where things get interesting if that happens. And so, and look, it's the recruiting and transfer portal era too. Like, it's one of those things where if you're going to win at A&M, which I mean, Jimbo brought good players in, it's just they couldn't get it done in terms of getting to the level, like we said, that fans expect them to, and the board, everybody expects them to, the people who are paying the money. So that's probably where I would start. I mean, I don't think, like you said, no offense to anyone out there that's accomplished great things in this year or beyond just this year. But like I said earlier, I think there is something to the fact that, like, when you're A&M and you're about to make this move and you're paying $75 million plus to make this move, you are aiming at the very highest point, right? Like, people probably, and like you said, I'm not knocking those other guys, and it may wind up being one of the other guys, but that's just my guess in terms of looking at their mindset of this. Not saying necessarily that I would hire guy X or guy Y, but it's my looking at what their mindset is and thinking, hey, this is such a significant decision that we want the biggest body of work, or just everything that ties it together to make us feel like this is the perfect hire on every level, knowing that, like I said, we can say it doesn't mean anything, but it does. When Texas comes in next year and Texas is a preseason top 5 team or whatever, and Texas A&M is, I don't know, wherever they are outside the top 25 or something like that, it's one team, but we know what that means, Chris. Like, that, it's a new ball game. Like, it's not just here we are in different conferences. Like, these are things that matter in the state of Texas. So that's just one piece of the puzzle, because it's all about the bigger SEC getting the playoff. But now that it is an expanded playoff, that opportunity is there. So you've got to make the most of it. And so, yeah, I would start with those two, probably. And look, there's another name that people are throwing out there. I know. I don't wonder if you can guess where I'm going with this, and you can tell this is more of an entertaining thought. There's one name that I've already seen on Twitter people throwing out as much as possible. Now, their team has taken a bit of a turn here this year from where they started, but Coach Prime in College Station. That's what I see some people rooting for that. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. But
boy, I've got some comments there. Your coach might need to know all the rules first.
Boy. Coach Prime.
I thought you were going to say this would be a good SEC inside joke. John Gruden.
Oh gosh, not John Gruden.
Well, and or I thought maybe you're going to go James Franklin too. That was the other one that was popping in my head. But Deion Sanders, obviously, that's going to come up.
I've seen Franklin mentioned by people.
I could see that too. I think that could be the mutually sick of each other thing.
Here's a name for you. What about Dabo?
Ooh, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
But. Well, there was one I wanted to comment on, and I'm going to tell you the reason you could make a case for him, then the reason I wouldn't make a case for him, and then use that to springboard into who I would make a case for. Lane Kiffin's name was mentioned a few minutes ago. Now, Lane Kiffin's got the portal thing going. He can flip a roster. He's an offensive-minded head coach, and my goodness, they want that in College Station, as we know. That's why they hired Bobby Petrino. My problem is, and we did this in the live stream last night, who are the two teams squarely at the top of this league right now?
Yep. Georgia and Bama.
And what do? They have the best two defenses in the league. That is Alabama and Georgia. They have for some time. Lane Kiffin got shredded by Georgia last night. Happens to a lot of people, but they were not competitive when they played Alabama. They were not competitive when they played Georgia. Now, look, you can say, hey, it's Alabama and Georgia, and I get that. But that's the level you're trying to get to. Lane Kiffin's got no shortage of money in Oxford. Now, look, can he get more at Texas A&M? Yes, he can. But it's that inability to ever figure it out on defense that makes me question him. Now, this is why I think Dan Lanning is the best guy on that list. Several reasons. The offense is killing it. Numbers going into yesterday, and I cannot remember who they played, so excuse me. 47.5 points a game. They were giving up 16 points a game. Now, keep in mind, they beat USC yesterday, didn't they? Is that who it was?
I think it was.
All right, keep this in mind. That's coming in a league that is offensive-minded. So you got guys scoring points out the wazoo in the Pac-12. If you're giving up that few points, of course, Dan Lanning, been defensive coordinator in the league. So, I don't know. To me, that is the guy that makes most sense for them. Now, here's the problem. I think they got a really good shot to make the playoff. And how do you disentangle that with all the timelines for portals, signing day, all that stuff? And I do not think it is good for college football to see guys leave in the middle of a playoff chase to go take another job. I think that's bad for the sport. That's the reality. But anyway, to me, Dan Lanning is the best guy on that list.
I would put Lanning at the top of my list. Now, of course, the tie of, you talk about that. I mean, Elko was the defensive coordinator there for how many seasons? What, 4 seasons? 2018 to 21. Total defense, they finished 34th, 31st, 9th, and 20th. But I guess that's the question, right? I mean, that's always a tricky thing to me. Like, do you bring in the guy who was already there with the former like, I don't know. I'm sure there's instances that's happened, but like, I don't know if it's, I don't know. Maybe they're like, hey, this is the guy. We're going to turn it over to him and go. But I don't know if they do that. But maybe it is as simple as that. I just think the money. We'll see. I'm curious to see where Elko falls in the list, like in the pecking
I don't know.
order.
I mean, I'm not saying he's bad. I'm just thinking I don't think you shell out that kind of money. And again, that includes.
I don't either.
For a guy that has just not been in that same league. Maybe he can be, but to me, I think it is. My guess is they either think they've got a really good chance at somebody or they've got somebody. And if they get a Mike Elko, no offense, that means that something has gone not according to plan.
Yeah, and like I said, it's just man, yeah, it's interesting. And Lanning's buyout, I don't remember if you said this. If you did, I apologize. But I know Andy Staples put out his $20 million the buyout for Lanning in Oregon.
So you're almost $100 million in before you paid anybody
Yeah.
a penny to coach going forward.
Kalen DeBoer is $12 million. We don't know Elko's as Andy Staples notes because it's private. So, yeah. So I mean, that's something to think about, right? Like that's. But if you're willing to pay this much to get rid of Jimbo, like again, it's not a problem. Like we know
If you're in
is
for a penny,
no.
you're in for a pound, right?
Sure. Like what's another? If you're paying $75 million, what's another? 75 at that point. I mean, it's whatever.
Sign me
I
up to
wish
live
I
in
was
that
in that
world, please.
situation. Like I wish I could say that, but I can't. Which, by the way, if you want to help us get to that level, you can do that by joining the It Just Means More tier. $3.99 a month.
Make a Jimbo tier.
We need about 20 million of you to jump in there, but we'll get there. You can do that by hitting that button down there for us. If you want to donate some money, you can tip us with that way.
I'll make a promise here. If we get enough money, we'll hire Jimbo Fisher to join us on this channel every Saturday.
We'll hire Dan Lanning if you give us enough money.
If you give us enough money, we'll hire Dan Lanning to come here at Southeastern 14.
He's leaving Oregon for us, but yeah, that's what we need. So I don't know. This is going to be interesting. We know how coaching searches work in the SEC period, but I think A&M is such an interesting scenario now because of the record buyout that they're paying. Yeah, I mean, and look, I've seen some other people mention too. It's like, hey, maybe Elko is the guy because you do have a nucleus on defense that is in place to where that's the tricky thing about these things too, man. It's transfer portal, right? Like it's tricky. Like your roster can completely just be blown up in a single offseason. And now that this change is made, there's something else that we've kind of touched on, but it is important to note because you're making this change with 2 games left. And you think about the way, again, the transfer portal works and there's new rules and stuff, but it's just something to think about. Like, we know how this thing works in college football. Whether you've got,
man, that's the other thing. You've got to pony up NIL to keep your guys in place to keep them from going other places, and then NIL for the next guy's people.
Do you think Mike Norvell? I mean, that's a big one because but again, he's someone that is in prime spot to make the playoff, and
yeah, I think they have the best chance of anybody to get there just based on who's ahead.
Yeah.
But I mean, and that's a guy that 2 years ago was, gonna a couple of losses from being in this spot where he was going to be let go.
Yeah.
So,
can I just tell you one name it's not going to be that I keep seeing people throwing around? I just cannot see Urban Meyers. Folks, I just don't think it's going to happen. Now, if it happens, we're gonna play this on loop, but we're also going to be playing a lot of Texas A&M fan calls because I think if that happens, I don't think it's going to be a positive reaction, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, Chris. That's all we got for now. We were doing this as most people are, just kind of reacting to the news and giving some initial thoughts, but obviously we'll have a lot more as this thing officially starts in terms of, the coaching search and everything. And it, as always in the SEC, doesn't matter who it is. It's going to be a wild search probably. So we'll see.
I think we need to start a Jimbo buyout tier here at the channel. Can we make that happen?
I mean, I'm okay with that. It's good for us, but yeah. So we'll see. I mean, there's A&M, as we know, is a program that has the resources and can have a lot of success. It's just it's not reached the level they've wanted it to reach since they hired Jimbo, and you're just seeing what's happening elsewhere in the SEC and knowing, again, the SEC gets stronger by 2 teams starting next season. The competition only is getting tougher in every area, like you just mentioned, NIL, recruiting, transfers, expanded conference, like all those things combined. Every hire is an important hire, but like this one is biggest hire for A&M.
When like $4 or $5 million used to be a deterrent to firing a coach?
I don't know, right? Not anymore. So
no.
We'll burn 78 million. Is that what I think? Yeah, 78. So, Must be nice.
All right, buckle
Hold on,
up.
Chris. Quickly, A&M fans, we know you're watching. In the comments, give us your short list candidates. Again, we're not saying this is who's going to get hired. We're bantering about like everybody else. Who would you put on your short list? Give me your top name. Give us your top 3, whatever. Who would you hire? Who's A&M gonna hire? All that good stuff. So a lot of interaction on this one because that's why we did this. We want to hear your guys' thoughts on what you think is going to happen. And of course, other SEC fans, you can also give us your thoughts as well because I'm sure a lot of them will be very serious in terms of who you want A&M to hire.
I'm sure.
But we'll have fun with it.
Right. All right. We're here for it. Thank you for watching Southeastern 14 presented by BetOnline. We'll see you again soon.